All right, the 8 a.m. advisory is in on Tropical Storm Helene. I got to tell you, I think next update, 11 a.m., it should become Hurricane Helene. Right now, the maximum winds are up to 70 miles per hour. At 5 a.m., it was 65. At 2 a.m., it was 60. This system is getting stronger, and the next step will be for it to become a hurricane, likely at 11 a.m. If for some reason it's not officially at 11, it likely would become Hurricane Helene this afternoon, but I do think we'll get there probably late morning. All right, as we look at the forward progress on this thing, movements northwest at 9 miles per hour. The forecast track has not changed. Folks there in the Big Bend section of Florida, be prepared to deal with a lot of storm surge, powerful winds. I think there'll be a threat of tornadoes across Florida, up into Georgia, even into South Carolina here as we go through the next 36 to 48 hours. So this is what we're looking at. Again, a landfall, potential major hurricane. You can see it's forecast to reach Category 3 strength Thursday afternoon, 2 o'clock. Those winds projected to be around 120 miles per hour maximum sustained. Comes inland, and once it's over land, it loses a lot of its punch by 2 a.m. Friday morning. South central Georgia, 75 mile per hour maximum winds, again, losing intensity, but still a very dangerous storm. And then it moves back over central and western or eastern portions of Tennessee and then into western Kentucky. Now, you'll notice it rains out in this area, and there's not as much movement from Friday through Sunday. So there's going to be concern for flooding up in this region. The main threats here across Florida will be some wind, obviously a lot of storm surge and destructive wind in the Big Bend area, and then up into Georgia, South Carolina, tornadic threat, heavy rain, maybe some flooding in the mountains of western sections of South Carolina into North Carolina. Here's where the tropical storm warnings are. And again, you can see this is basically encompassing all of South Florida. You get along the coast here and you pick up hurricane warnings from just to the north of Tampa all the way up through the Big Bend region, and that extends up into southern parts of Georgia. Now, I wanted to show you again, based on the forecast track, you're saying, okay, well, here's where the forecast cone is. The center of Helene expected to track in this red area. But notice how the areas of impact expand out, especially to the right of the track, where into the Carolinas, again, heavy rain and wind potential for flooding there. Hampton Roads really isn't in that area. The worst of this should be farther to the west. However, we are going to be on the fringe of this, and that could still mean some trouble for us. I will explain here as we take a look. Notice how it moves along. And this is the graph model. It's just one of our models to show you the general thinking. Now, keep in mind, here's where the graph has this thing positioned. This is 8 p.m. Thursday. The actual Hurricane Center forecast is a little farther to the east. It's more into this area here and a little closer to the coast. So again, this just gives you a depiction of kind of some of the effects we could see as it moves up through Georgia. Again, this model carries it here and then wraps it back to the northwest. The official Hurricane Center forecast brings it to here and then wraps it back. So it would be a little farther to the west. That puts us right on the fringe here in Hampton Roads. Most of the heavier stuff should be a little farther west and down to the south. So we're going to continue to watch that. But fringe impacts we could feel in Hampton Roads includes breezy conditions, and some of those outer rain squalls could produce some locally heavier rain and maybe an isolated tornado threat. It's not great, but there is a marginal or level 1 threat, and I'll explain that. For Thursday, the greater threat, as I mentioned, down along South Carolina into Georgia here near the coast with this system wrapping in, bringing bands in, some heavier squalls. We could see some spin-up tornadoes anywhere across Florida into Georgia. So that's where we have that level 3 threat for severe weather along the Georgia coast and the southern tip of South Carolina. As we get into Thursday, or Friday rather, you're going to notice that the severe weather threat is more confined to North Carolina and Southside Hampton Roads. It does include the peninsula, but here we have just a level 1 threat, but still On the fringe of that system, if we get some cells coming in that are a little more intense, you might still find a little rotation. So we need to be on guard through Friday afternoon for potential isolated little spin up. So we'll be watching for that. Otherwise, just some areas of rain. And we do have a level 1 or marginal flood outlook from the Weather Prediction Center as well. Just some pockets of heavy rain. And this will all be dependent on how far east those bands kind of reach, those cells that we're talking about on the fringe, or if they're farther west, obviously we won't have as much to worry about. So a little uncertainty as to how it will impact us, but there's a pretty good chance that we will see some wet weather from that. So there's a track on Helene. 2 other areas we're watching. This one, which we've been seeing near the Republic of Cabo Verde, it is now moving to the west of that. It is forecast to track west and then eventually turn to the north. 80% chance of development. Next name on the list is Isaac. We'll see if that develops. And then in the north part of the Atlantic, the north central Atlantic, we've got another area that only has a 20% chance of development. Doesn't really seem to have much of a threat to land. We'll be watching some of the island groups over in the northeastern Atlantic, but for the most part, we're just looking at that disturbed area. So that's all that's going on in the tropics right now, but the biggest story, again, Helene, and folks in Florida need to be ready for it, and then the heavy rain spreading up through the southeast U.S. and eventually into Tennessee and Kentucky. We will, of course, keep you updated. Again, Helene, a tropical storm at 8 a.m., likely to become Hurricane Helene later today.